You're told that it's not only the Nazis who killed Jews, but all Germans killed them. And not only all Germans, all Christians wanted Jews to be killed. So the narrative is going to change to include everyone. Everyone who's not Jewish living in Western society is somehow going to be implicated in this. Who then are the good people? Well, you could say the Danes helped Jews, or somewhere there's a small country, or some other groups. We say there were some righteous Gentiles, but there are not too many of them. You don't bother to focus on this. The good people are those who suffer with the Jews, blacks, homosexuals, right? All these other groups. And not only that, but Hitler, according to this myth, went around killing homosexuals as thoroughly as he killed Jews. Lesbians, of course, I don't think there's a single example of a lesbian killed by the Nazis, but a monument in Berlin to lesbians who were killed by Hitler. So you do is you include all these preferred victim groups, and Jews see them as their allies in a common struggle against Nazism, which is linked to fascism, which is linked to the right, and which is finally linked to white Christian society. Right? It's all very simple. And I think this transformation occurs in the 1960s, 1970s. You would walk into a synagogue and you would no longer see, I don't know, on some fast day, you wouldn't see any longer the stuff you used to see, ancient symbols. You see pictures of people in concentration camps. And we're reminded that this was done not only by Nazis, it was done by Pius XII, done by all these other people. They all had a hand in this destruction. Now, of course, this is a gross oversimplification. It is a lie almost, on a scale of Nazi lies, but it is accepted. And there's sort of a predisposition, particularly among Eastern European Jews, to believe this, because they've left a society in which Christians did persecute Jews. The ones who came from Germany or these places, no, they had lived in, they were already emancipated, or this before they came. They were part of the general society in some sense. But the ones who came from Eastern Europe remembered, had bitter experiences back there, and this narrative that everyone who has persecuted us, and generally European Christians and their American descendants are suspect of having Nazi or anti-Semitic sentiments. I think it is very hard. It's very hard to understand the cultural, social radicalization of Jews, not just about the fact that they're socialists, but that they support the cultural, social left, not just the economic left. I think this is hard to explain unless you take into account the change in the view of the Holocaust, the centrality of the Holocaust. One might say for Jewish memories, folk memories, even for people who never went through the Holocaust, this becomes the centerpiece, and then finally the attempt to extend guilt to the entire white Christian population. And I think this is a critical step in understanding why Jews, particularly in the United States, and I see in Germany and other countries, have become radicalized. If you notice, there's also a spate of Holocaust museums. Right? And this does not go away. Many of the ritual practices, the observances of Jews within a traditional Jewish community are no longer kept. So this is not going to bind the group together. What will bind the group together is a sense of an enemy. The enemy unites, and the enemy is basically white Christian society. That is, to whatever extent it remains a white Christian society. Now, even these people are redeemable, because if you invite in enough of the rest of the world, immigration, then you dilute the poison, right? So you have these people coming in from Asia, or people coming in from Africa, or especially from Latin America, who for some reason are not viewed, by American Jews as Christians. They're just viewed as, Amerindians or people coming from another area. The more you emphasize the role of victims, of other victim groups, the less America will look like the country that might, turn against the Jews. And in my book on multiculturalism, I quote Abe Foxman, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, who is sort of, in many ways, the perfect exemplar of all the attitudes that I'm describing. And he makes a statement that within 50 years, America will no longer be a white Christian country, and we can feel safe. So, I mean, there is this strong animus, which I think is present, and it is, at this point, very hard to remove. Something that reinforces it, by the way, is when you have liberal Christians coming along and saying, yeah, you know, we really did commit the Holocaust, and you know, our group really did all these awful things, and you know, we're responsible for what happened to you. I remember there was about 2 years ago, the Amish in Pennsylvania asked forgiveness of world jury for not having done enough to prevent the Holocaust. Now, these are 16th century German peasants who are locked in these villages who barely know what's going on in the world. They ask forgiveness, you know, for the Holocaust. I remember seeing reading a statement by Ralph Reed, the head of the Christian Coalition, who is, I think now, a Fox regular contributor. And he pointed out, I think Fox made a comment that American Christians aren't aware enough, they're not sufficiently aware of all the things done to my people in the Spanish Inquisition. Whereupon Ralph Reed said, yes, I accept personal responsibility. Well, here I'm thinking of, how is this Baptist from England or something, how is he responsible for the Spanish Inquisition? Nor were any of Fox's ancestors. They were from Eastern Europe. They were not living in Spain. You know, but I call this, it's a kind of surrogate atonement. Like you atone for something that you're in no way responsible for in relation to somebody who's in no way a victim. But, you know, you stand for, you are sort of a representative of the victimizing group, and the other is a representative of the victim group, right? So you go ahead and you apologize to that person. But every time this kind of silliness takes place, I think it encourages this this hostile attitude toward white Christians, and it reinforces the belief that they're somehow responsible for something they never did. And I think in many ways the radicalization of Jews in the United States and to some extent in Western Europe becomes almost a model for other groups. I remember speaking to a close friend of mine, the late Will Herberg, who taught something like Jewish theology at a Protestant school, but Herberg was saying, you know, Jews are becoming radicalized because they're imitating blacks. And I was thinking, I was very young at the time, I didn't want to hurt his feelings by thinking that, no, the blacks are imitating Jews. I mean, the sense of alienation, the quest for the phony history you invent. You have to invent a history to explain your alienation. I'm alienated because they all did this or that to me. And again, I would sort of come back to a point that Professor Lin made, that if you're dealing with a group that has a very high IQ, you know, you're not dealing with groups that are less intellectually vigorous, are less present in the professions, have less, are less clever at verbalizing. These attitudes are going to make themselves felt in the general culture. Okay. Black attitudes are important only because whites decide to notice them, because they fit into other agendas, and because, particularly in contemporary liberal Christianity, there is I call the politics of guilt. You know, so the Jewish influence makes itself felt because Jews make themselves felt. You know, and in particularly, as I said, in verbalizing, you know, as a verbal class in television, you see them all the time in journalism. And you see, you know, what is the effect of all of this? Well, I think if you look at I look at, you know, two areas, we might say, of Jewish activity, and I'll say, you know, which has had the more harmful effect. We're not looking for a positive effect here. I mean, Jews have had a positive effect on medical science and banking and areas like that. If we're looking at the culture, I think it's been a generally negative effect in the United States, certainly in my lifetime. And I would say the two areas that people, you know, that at least I have noticed, one of them is Jewish Zionist activity. I would say that, you know, this is annoying, but even if Jews weren't around, I could imagine particularly the Christian right, which is fanatically Zionist, pushing the Republican Party into taking a very strong Zionist position. I don't think the Jewish presence is absolutely essential. Second of all, I disagree with Mearsheimer and Wald's argument that there's something new about the way the Jewish lobby operates. It is no different from the way other lobbies, ethnic lobbies, have influenced America. It's just Jews have more power and more money. With one exception, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant groups which pushed the United States into World War I because they were pro-British and used all of their influence in politics to do so. But one might say that in their defense, they were the majority in the country at the time. The Jews are only 2% of the population. But I don't think the Zionist influence would be totally gone even if no Jews were around, because it is such a powerful force, particularly in the Christian right. And not only among fundamentalists, but among other Christians who seem to accept the idea that Jews are a chosen people and that Israel is the country that they must occupy in order to be in conformity with God's will. The other area, and I keep coming back to this, and everybody knows this is my idée fixe, and this is the neoconservatives. What they have basically done is destroy an American right-wing opposition. That it is impossible in the United States for anybody on the right to be noticed, unless it's Rand Paul, who's dismissed as a kook, to say, no, I do not favor a global democratic foreign policy. No, I do not favor this aggressive form of liberal internationalism, which the Republican Party is now pursuing, which it goes contrary to any kind of American conservative tradition. Nor is there any reason to see Israel, as the central focus of an American Jewish foreign policy. I am pro-Israel. I have members of my family who escaped from Central Europe, and they let them in there, and they lived in Israel. That's fine. But the notion that somehow one can only be a conservative by being a screaming Zionist is, I think, absolutely absurd. And yet this is the prevalent idea in the United States, that Zionism and conservatism travel together. Amongst with other things, of course, with Martin Luther King, Sidney Hook, all of these neoconservative heroes, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, and whatever. Basically, it is the whole iconography of the neoconservatism imposed on the conservative movement, a movement which is in no way conservative anymore. And I think this may be the greatest disservice that American Jews have done to our political system. At one time you could take positions that were different from those of the liberal media, academic left, and so forth, and you could be a conservative. Most of the distance has now been removed or obliterated, and on social questions, many ideological questions, the left and the so-called the authorized right are exactly the same. With only, if there are differences, they are insignificant differences, and this, I think, has to do very much with part of, when I say, politically motivated Jews with money, means moving into the so-called Republican conservative camp and taking it over and turning it in a very, very dangerous direction, in my opinion. One of the worst effects is it has eliminated dissent. You no longer, conservatives no longer sound very different from liberals, except on foreign policy. And on foreign policy, they sound like crazed liberals. And I think that this has been an effect, one might say, of the presence and influence of Jews within the conservative movement. Now, I do make exceptions. I mean, obviously, Murray Rothbard, who was an outsider, would not fit into this category. And if you give me a few minutes, I can think of at least a dozen other people. Certainly within the early conservative movement, there were Jews like Frank Meyer and others who were bona fide conservatives. But what has happened is that the Jewish influence today in the conservative movement is entirely, almost entirely, again, there are a few exceptions that come to mind. They're entirely neoconservative influence, and I think this has had a very dangerous effect on political debate in the United States, what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. Finally, to me it is annoying to turn on a television on what is supposed to be a conservative Republican channel and hear nothing but the political position, not only of the Likud party, but of even the kooky parties to the right of the Likud party in Israel, and to be told that this is essential conservatism. A point that I've made is that being for or against Israel in the conservative movement is like liking chocolate or vanilla ice cream. It's fine, it's your personal taste. It is not essential for determining whether one holds or does not hold a conservative worldview. And the fact that this has made the sine qua non of conservatism, together with all sorts of liberal ideas that in my youth we rejected as leftist ideas, is for me infuriating. And I think that this may be, at least for me, the most annoying sign of Jewish radical influence in the United States.